I was expecting some glitches here and there, but seems everything went fine. Good.
Yeah, I'm getting better. learning. Especially with all these technology people, I think I had to up my game this time. Right. Okay. So welcome everyone. Welcome Rajiv, Sam, and Palash, along with Tara and Kashmir. So this one is a web show on technology and engineering, and Tara and Kashmir have prepared some very interesting questions for all of you for their understanding of what you're doing, and also obviously which will help their future and probably others who are listening to it. So I'll hand over to the girls now. Tara?
Thank you, Anu.
Tara, do you want to
thank you.
first? Do you want to introduce yourself, and then we can have a quick introduction by the speakers as well?
Yeah, so my name is Tara. I'm an A-level student studying further maths, physics, and computer science, and I'm hoping to go to Durham next year on a scholarship. If Kashmir wants to introduce herself.
I'm year 11. I do computing, and I've had my own app as well. So I have a little bit of tech. Probably like to do it at uni as well, but I've got a couple of years before having to think about that.
And
yes,
yeah, I'm Rajiv. I'm in the IT space for last 20 years, specifically in the ERP space, and I use products like SAP and for ERP, which is quite industry-wide standard for resource planning. And I also use integration applications from SAP and MuleSoft. We'll discuss more of them in detail, but essentially more of Office IT ERP packages that I deal with.
Sam, do you want to go next? Quick introduction, what you're doing, quite interesting.
Sure, yeah. So I'm currently a final year PhD student in AI and computer vision at Imperial College, where my research focus is mostly in automatedly generated AI, as opposed to us hand designing AI algorithms. But other than that, my other focus is in my own venture, which is to do with predictive healthcare analytics.
Interesting.
Palash, can we hear from you?
Sure. So hi all, I'm Palash Mattu. I'm also a student at Imperial College London, and I'm studying Aerospace Engineering, which is mostly to do with specializing in spacecraft engineering. And that's where my main interests are, as we'll probably see later.
Right, thank you everyone. So I'm going to now hand over to Tara and Kashmir. So you can start, girls.
Thank you. So the first question we've got is for Rajiv. We were wondering, how did you get to your current job? As in, what made you want to study it, and then what did you do to eventually get yourself to the position you're in now, career-wise?
Okay, my education has been in India. I did my electronics and communications engineering in India, and we had the subjects around computers. It always fascinated me. I mean, you would think of things and you could actually translate into some piece of code and make it run on a computer in your university labs. And that somehow got me interested into this thing. And since then I researched more about it during my uni days. And I ended up learning Java, Oracle, those days, a couple of languages like BASIC and all. And then I accidentally stumbled across SAP, which was a big thing those days, and there were not many people around who had those skills. So being a fresh student with interest in computing, I decided to just learn. And the way I started was interesting. I still remember in Mumbai, I got a book which was like Learn SAP in 101 days, something like that. And I started off from there. Quite humble beginnings that way, but that's where my career started. And every day I spent into it, I realized how much value I was adding to the company or the clients I was working with. you could see the way you were transforming the business processes, etc. there. And that really got me more and more interested in it. And you start, developing your skills or enhancing your skills further in different areas of that ERP. And that's where I started. And it so happened that I ended up getting headhunted by a UK company. I was still in India with Accenture those days, and I got a call one fine day. Hello, we are from UK, from blah 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 company. Would you like to join us? And I was like, if someone's playing a prank on me. Well, I was like, okay, can you give me a number and I'll just call you back? And they said, trust us, it's a genuine call, and the rest is history. You started off from there. And I came to UK in the year 2004 or 5, yeah. And since then, it's been the same journey with different clients here, companies here in UK, and really satisfying and rewarding to see what your skills help these companies to achieve.
Thank you. And so from what you have said, Rajiv, so we can already tell that it's very, very advanced, something that a lot of us wouldn't understand, but at least in kind of layman's terms, or would you be able to tell us, like on a day-to-day basis, what you do?
Interesting. My job is mostly client-based. I work as a consultant. So I keep up every 6 months or a year, and every client has a different need, different requirement for their business processes. Just to give you some background, when I say ERP, what does it mean? So in simple words, if you talk about any big company, you think of any brand, whether it's Coca-Cola or any other company for that matter, they have lots of processes behind. So starting from to get it, when to get it, at what all these, and that's what ERP roughly, is about. It helps you align all of your business's processes into a single package, and from a management point of view, you have all the data available in one software or one system where you can then make business decisions going forward. Now, how do I help these companies? Once they get ERP package, let's say SAP, you need to configure it. Then lots of these companies, they have existing software systems, small applications, let's call them. We want those applications to send their data or talk to SAP. And at the same time, SAP sending the data down to those softwares. And I specialize there in terms of integration. I make the systems talk to each other. I make the systems exchange the data and manage the whole process. I also help these companies to set up their SAP product in first instance. How do they align their processes? How do they make sure that business processes are fit for purpose, are meeting the current market standards or requirements? So it's case by case. Every year I move to a different client. Currently I'm with Deloitte. They have a big SAP transformation going on, and we are rolling it out to different Deloitte member firms across Europe. We have done it so far for 7 countries in the last 3 years, planning to do it for other countries as well. So they're just getting on board, aligning their processes. Lot of technical stuff that I can talk about SAP and all, but I don't think that's very appropriate for you guys to understand. But at a high level, it's just around processes. How do you integrate them?
That sounds very complex, but definitely also really interesting to hear sort of what goes behind a lot of what we take for granted. So thank you. Just to switch it up a little bit, Sam, you mentioned in the biography you gave that you had a startup, Third Eye Intelligence. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what that was.
Yeah, sure. So the idea of third eye was it actually spawned from my grandfather, who was unfortunately admitted to intensive care, but within 5 days of span being there, he unfortunately died due to multi-organ failure. And it turns out he's actually not alone. And the problem is that organ failure is often detected too late, so interventions are delayed and survival chances are really low. In fact, almost up to 50% of patients that are admitted to ICU will die, which is almost equivalent to random chance, right? Which is flip of a coin. And that statistic didn't sit in well with me. So what we created was an evolving AI system that processes all the data stored in electronic health records and predicts whether one or multiple organs will fail before onset, so that we can give clinicians that longer time window to react and intervene.
That's honestly, that's amazing. I didn't think you could. I didn't think that that was what you would do at a university level, but that's really cool and interesting.
Yeah, sorry. So that was so much taken. So is that basically what pushed you to AI? Kind of the idea of what you can do and what applications you had to help people, and like what led you towards doing that and computer science to study at such high level?
Wow, that's a good journey. So originally, I was never a computer scientist by training, right? I was actually doing biomedical engineering before, which was more predominantly focused towards mechanical design, like prosthetic design or hip design, and doing mostly CAD modeling and stuff like that. So I didn't even know P of programming at that point. And what happened was during my third year in my bachelor's project, I walked across my lab and I caught a friend of mine who was doing mechanical engineering, and his bachelor's project was in robotic design. And I saw this really cool diagram on his screen. I didn't know what it meant, but it looked really cool. And I asked him what it was. And what happened at that point is I said, okay, let's just read around what it is. And I was just purely bored. So this happened by chance. And I read about what he had mentioned, which was at the time an algorithm called hidden Markov models. And I was flabbergasted with the fact that this is actually AI. This is real. Because up till then, it was only in movies that I had heard about it. I never thought there was a possibility that this was a thing, but it was a thing. And there was evidence to show it. So after that, essentially that summer, I just kept digging and digging. And luckily, it was at the time where AI was just taking off, as in there were now resources available to learn more about machine learning. So this was around 2016 time. And what I decided was I told my professors that I will do my course stuff during the day, but at night or evening time, I want to do a project that is different to what my course actually gives me an option to in the computer science department, so that I can learn programming and learn to apply it. And that's essentially how I got into it. So I learned by doing, literally walking through the fire. Because when I just kept reading books, the theoretical knowledge was actually really overwhelming because there's so much out there. But when you break it down into what is needed at what time and actually apply it and see it materialize in front of you, the learning process just accelerated. And from there on, it just became the case of how do I marry what I had learned previously in engineering to this new programming skill that I had learned. So I moved on to a master's in robotics, again at Imperial. And then I decided I want to go purely into intelligence, because for me, the idea was that cracking intelligence, or the brain behind the robotics, is what's going to be the next cutting edge, right? It's what leads to that cognition in intelligent robotics. And I wanted to go all in terms of the field of intelligence, which meant learning about NLP, which is all about learning from text, as well as computer vision, learning from images, and purely robotic learning, which is more theoretical side of control. And then it just became the case of practicing and practicing till it just became second nature.
That's really cool. And yeah, I completely agree that with something like computer science, you do have to learn by doing. Reading isn't going to always get you to where you need to be. But thank you so much for that. switching it up a little bit, Palash, you're an aeronautics student, which is slightly different from these other two. Could you explain to us what got you to do aeronautics?
Okay, well, at the end of my A-levels, I was just kind of considering what kind of options I would like to go into. And I knew that I wanted to go into engineering because I've always enjoyed kind of playing with electronics and mechanical stuff. And that kind of came from one of the projects I'd done at school, which involved making a glove which can help the blind people see. And essentially how it works is you just kind of have an ultrasonic signal which is able to scan the environment and then send that information back to the hand of the person wearing the glove, which was the product. And using that, you can essentially just kind of scan your environment without actually having to feel around for it, or if you're not able to see. So that was kind of my first ever engineering project, which led me to consider my options in engineering. And while aerospace engineering or aeronautical engineering seems like a bit of a niche, I picked it because it does cover a lot of the other aspects. I mean, it's officially accredited by both mechanical engineers and the Royal Aeronautics Society. So it felt like it should be a degree which should open up a lot of options for myself. So that's why I've chosen aeronautics.
Thank you. And I think I know that you went to some rocketry club as well. So what kind of projects did you work on there, and what did you do there?
Okay, well, this rocketry club is a bit of an interesting one because it only started off the year that I joined university. So, I mean, Imperial College London hasn't had a rocketry club for quite a long time. And because of all these competitions that keep coming up, it was some of our seniors were kind of aspiring to be able to compete in those competitions. And so it gave rise to Imperial College London Rocketry, which we call ICLR for short. And our aim was always to create rockets and also payloads, which the rocket would be able to carry. So a payload is anything essentially which you would want to send up to space. I mean, a rocket is just a vehicle. It's serving a purpose, and the purpose is to deliver a payload. Now, what a lot of teams do is they just put what's called a boilerplate mass in there, essentially just 4 kilos of whatever they can fit in there. And it's just to prove that, okay, we are capable of carrying such and such mass in our rocket to whatever altitude you're aiming for. In our team, we decided that we would want to make our own payloads from scratch. So that's the team that I'd initially joined, without completely knowing that it would end up to a lot more electronics that I'd signed up for. But essentially, our first payload that we're building involves of an array of 4 cameras, which would be able to spin at the exact opposite rate at which the rocket would spin, which would hopefully give us quite a nice view of the view outside the rocket as it's going on its trajectory.
That's really interesting, seeing how the kind of the high level stuff they're doing at Imperial. Actually, I've only ever visited. It's not something that I'd see there very often. So thank you for that. Circling back to Rajiv, as the sort of the person here who works, what would you say your favorite part is about working in the technology industry? I've heard they can be quite lax about things. What do you think is the best part about having a job in that industry?
It depends from industry to industry. I mean, from my perspective, from client to client. But what interests me, what keeps me going is, Anu might be aware, every few months I have a delivery, we call it a go live, okay, where we deploy a big piece of functionality or new setup into the live environment that clients use. And once they actually see the systems working, once they actually see the data flowing from one system to another system, and that data drives lots of applications or processes or workflows on their end. That satisfaction that they derive, and the praise that you get, wow, how do you do it? And though at times you would feel, you have not done something really great, you do it, I've been doing it for the last 20 years, but the people who have never done it before, they're like, wow, how do you do it? And that kind of gives you that kick. Okay, there are still people who admire your skills, so that keeps you going. It's not like, oh yeah, anyone can do it. You are doing a specialist job, though you've been doing it for quite some time, but it's still a specialist job, and that keeps me going.
We
Thank you.
mentioned, sorry, I said Rajiv did mention the number of hours he has to put in as well.
Yeah, that's different side of the story. Yes, you have to put in some, let's say extra hours, but I think same is true with some other professions. Like we have seen doctors these days with COVID thing, and all of you would have seen the kind of effort, the number of hours they have to put in to achieve a type of result that they aspire. So same thing in IT as well. If you really need to um, you know get to certain milestones, get certain results, uh, there are times you have to put in odd hours, not extra hours, odd and extra hours as well. I was telling Anu just before this Facebook meeting, I was still working. We had another go live in the pipeline. So I was supporting the client there, and now I've taken an hour off. So I'm just here on the Facebook, and after this, back again.
So it's very, very clear that you know the industry very well and you've been in it for 20 years. And I think technology specifically as an industry is just getting more and more competitive every day. So what advice would you have to people who want to get into the industry, like students? What skills do you think that they definitely need?
I would say the way Sam is working on artificial intelligence, that's the new thing, new kid on the block. Let's put it that way in terms of technology. If you can get your hands on that kind of training or those subjects involving machine learning, artificial intelligence, cloud is the current thing. I think that'll go a long way. Where I come from, I came from a time of packaged softwares. Yes, it's still being used, but the way new things, AI, machine learning is coming in, even the ERP software is getting influenced. We have different modules or components getting integrated into the system, which have artificial intelligence as part of the process. So for youngsters, yes, the fields like AI, machine learning, clouds, that's the area to go. If you really understand, if you're really keen about technology, because IT as such is pretty vast. When we talk about IT, you would have seen, or you might have come across people who simply maintain the computers or the networks in offices. That's also a skill set. Okay, there are security experts, cyber security experts. Another area where I would suggest, if you have the interest, that's going to be another well-paying field as well in future. Okay, because with all these, you would have heard about cyber attacks and other things happening quite commonly these days. So if you are someone with the security skills, computer or cyber security skills, you will be in demand. So that's another area you can go on. So same way, as I said, there are various other areas, or traditionally database administrators who simply look after the databases. But if you ask me about the niche skills, I would say about the cyber security, artificial intelligence, machine learning. These are the areas you need to focus on. Okay.
That's really helpful, I think. Yeah, those are, from what I've heard as well, they're really in demand skills, aren't they? And they'll be paying, as well as the experience you'll be getting, they'll be paying quite well in the future. So thank you for that. But speaking of AI, Sam, you mentioned in this the biography that you gave that you won an IGHI Health Innovation Award. That sounds really impressive. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's essentially Imperial holds a bunch of different competitions for venture-led students so that they can get some funding. So we applied to every single one that Imperial held. In particular, one of them was purely for medical-based startups, and that was called IGHI, which stands for Institute of Global Health Innovation. And that was one award that we had won. And there was a series of other awards as well that we won, which was a total of 6, which essentially accrued our seed fund in order to continue development of the company technology, really.
That's very impressive. So you've done a lot as we've done a lot of different things so far, and you mentioned that you also co-authored a book. Correct me if I'm wrong. But can you tell us a little bit more about that specifically?
Yeah. I'm sorry, your voice kept cutting out a little bit. Did you ask about the book that I was co-authoring, and you just want more details on that?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, so in my particular contribution, so the book is actually rather vast. It's meant to be the largest book in artificial intelligence when it comes out in spring of nature. And my contribution was more towards learning of AI systems. So like I said, if you look at even in the field of AI, and this sort of ties in with what Rajiv sir was saying, that there are multiple different niches, even in a broader field. So think of every field that you come across in computer science as an umbrella term. And within that, there's always hiring going on for more niche or more specialized components. And that's what the company is essentially paying for. But in AI, you have different niches just like that. You have computer vision, you have natural language processing, and other areas. And my interest is more towards designing learning systems within AI. And this is a huge research field still. But the idea is, I'm sure you've heard of the term biases before. So for example, if they train a machine learning algorithm on a certain particular type of data, let's say a data for detecting people, but the data only comprised of only Caucasian people, in which case when it's effectuated on a different skin color people, then the model fails because it never observed it in learning. Now, if you extrapolate that to more severe cases, right, these biases can have detrimental impact on decision making. So for example, it will be very easy to say that in the near future, you'll have a machine learning algorithm classifying whether someone's cancer is worth treating or not, right? And it's so easy to just, even a single component, and it could be unintentional, but it could be very easy to simply just bias it towards the insurance companies to save more money and prevent curing someone's cancer because you think that they won't survive anyway, so why even try, right? That is so easy to do. But the question then becomes is, how do you fairly learn AI processes so that even in a biased world, we can have a objective and unbiased system, which can prevent these detrimental impacts from happening. So my focus in that book was what we call learning to learn, which is a field of AI called meta learning. And idea is that instead of training AI to simply produce an output, we really ask what it is that the AI is learning and what it means to learn, right? And it's just a bunch of math that essentially tries to explain that in effectuation. And the beauty of that is one of the things we took from was how biological systems learn, as in humans. So for example, when we learn something new, we don't forget what we had learned in the past, right? I'm sure when you come across learning a new language or communicating with someone, if you've learned French, people say it's actually easier to learn Spanish or some other language that is closely related. But you don't forget French when you learn Spanish, right? But current AI systems don't do that. They forget everything that was learned in the past, and then they start all over again when they're learning something new. And this process is called catastrophic forgetting. And the chapter that I was working on was essentially aiming at how we prevent this from happening to have a more biological learning process.
That's really interesting. Actually, it'll be nice to hear to glance a bit at this book when it releases. Actually, as somebody who is maybe looking at studying AI herself, but we'll see. But no, thank you so much for that. Palash, you're an undergraduate at Imperial College. I know that when I was applying to university, unfortunately, I didn't apply to Imperial, but I know that when I did, when I was thinking of applying, I heard a lot about there being a lot of stress and pressure at Imperial, although it's certainly got a reputation for being an amazing place. Would you say that you agree with that? Would you say that, Palash, as an undergraduate, that's true, or what's your opinion on that?
I think the main source of any stress is the students themselves. Everyone at Imperial kind of wants to take their degree very, very seriously. That's why they're there. Now, what tends to happen is that throughout the year, you have multiple different projects, whether they are part of your course or something that you are doing externally. And a lot of your time actually gets consumed in those projects themselves. So what tends to happen is that you maybe miss a couple lectures, and then that kind of snowballs all the way through, and all of a sudden you've missed an entire module in some cases. So what tends to happen is that you need to cram a lot of your learning towards the end of your term when your exams are about to come up. And that's when a lot of, that's when a lot of the students tend to complain about stress. But I think if you have a well-balanced timetable, then it should not really be an issue. Although, as you said, Imperial is quite reputed for essentially throwing a lot of stuff at their students just to essentially overload them and get them used to being working a lot of hours, and to be able to produce more efficient solutions for whatever it is that they're doing. But I think overall, it's not too bad if you're able to manage your time well.
That does sound very stressful, and I think that's something that not everybody could manage. But you mentioned that, and we've been talking that you do aeronautical engineering. Where do you see space travel going in the next 10 years? And how would you kind of like to be a part of that, or where do you see yourself as well?
Okay, well, that's a very interesting question, because as you know, the UK does not really have a lot of opportunities in space itself. And that's mostly because of where the UK is situated on the globe. The first thing, it's way too high up in latitude, and that means that you don't have a lot of options for putting things in orbit. So if you do want to launch something, it only has a very small window of where it can actually go. Now that's a bit of a problem, because that kind of minimizes your options and you'd rather launch from somewhere else. The other thing is, again, related to its geography, it's all the way to the west of Europe. So if you look to your east, you have the entirety of, you have a lot of land. And that's a problem because you don't want to launch over land because of all the kinds of safety issues. So again, that limits launch capability quite a lot. And that's why UK is quite weak in the space sector in terms of launch itself. But that's not really a problem, because if you look at the system as a whole, rockets are actually quite a small part of it. There's a lot which goes into other architecture, for example, ground control operations, mission operations, planning, and so on. And for example, the payload itself and all the architecture related to that. So there's lots of different options for the UK to enter into such fields. And I think that's where it's mostly going as well. There's a company that has recently started a competition, which we're participating in. They're called UK LSL, which is United Kingdom Launch Services. And that's one of the things that they mostly deal with. They kind of deal with whatever happens on the ground to be able to take care of what's up in space. So that's mostly where the UK is at. And of course, if you go out, then you have much more options.
It's interesting to hear how the UK is sort of limited from a geographical standpoint more than anything. That's not something I'd have thought of before, actually. So thank you for that. That's really interesting. I've got more of a general question here for any of you to sort of pitch in if you think that, if you have an opinion on it. There's a sort of a discussion going on around about now that technology and the automation of a lot of industries is actually harmful to people because it's causing a lot of people to lose their jobs. Do you think that, firstly, how big of an issue do you think this is at the moment? And do you think that there's anything we can do about it? Again, to anybody who, either of you who want to sort of pitch in on that?
Yeah, I think I'll just give my opinion on this one first before others join in. I've heard this talk. I've seen things from within the industry. So when you talk about automation, it does have its own advantages. It does have its own advantages, right? So it does streamline a lot of business requirements in terms of their processes, which in simple terms means they're able to make more money. And that's what the business is all about, right? You're doing things ethically, but also generating a decent profit. So this automation does help them there. Now, yes, the other side of the story is you may have job losses. Agreed to an extent, yes, but automation itself will create lots of other job opportunities. Automation is not something which will, it's like a plug and play. You get some software and you just plug it in and everything gets automated. You still need engineers around who make sure this automation of your processes works fine. If there are any improvements needed, they do it. I have friends in Amazon here in UK, and one of them happens to be an automation engineer. And I had a discussion with this friend, about the same topic. And they say it has created so many jobs just in companies like Amazon. They do require it. I said, where do they require it? It's around, people like you and me. We go to Amazon, we order so many things. Finally, it's a big warehouse, a distribution center where all of their, let's say, goods are available. They are stacked up. So they have robots and all who work on some artificial intelligence algorithm. There's lots of automation involved, which once they receive an order, they know where exactly the product is. Fetch it, get it down onto the conveyor belts. It goes for packaging, then posting. Things happen very quickly. But to run such a slick process, they do require engineers as well who understand automation and all. So it's not all gloom that's being portrayed outside. Yes, we have to upskill. If you asked about, let's say if I had to ask my grandfather his opinion about computers, he would say, why do you need them? You have a calculator, you have a book or a pencil, you can do the maths yourself. Why do you need it? But you understand how things evolve. You have a mobile phone now, apps, all the apps are there. I won't say it's automation, but you can see the convenience, the ease of operation. So same way within businesses, automation brings an ease of running your processes, your systems. I don't think it's all gloom and doom. So that's my opinion about it.
I think we all appreciate the Amazon and all the, especially in this last year with all the lockdowns, we've all sort of used a lot of Amazon or any kind of online delivery systems. So we do sort of appreciate that in the background, what amount of work it must be involving.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to add to that in the sense that, there obviously are going to be some jobs that are not, it's not that they're going to be lost, it's that they're just not going to be required. So for example, menial labor jobs that are repetitive and are processes that can be automated, they can be done, right? We don't need to necessarily have that. And for a company, it's also makes sense to move towards a robotic platform that does that continuously. That being said, what we also forget is that every time a new revolutionary technology comes in, a new industry is born. right? This happened when electricity came. This happened when telecommunications came, when web came. Every time we thought when web came, okay, telephone communications are old school based lines that we used to have that were telephone masts connected. We don't need them anymore. And we don't, right? So if you see some places, they're still run down, but new jobs formed, right? And what you see is over time, which we seem to forget, is that the entire population needs to essentially evolve and become more intelligent with the time. And as more advanced the technology gets, the more advanced the people will have to be in order to operate them at the same time. And what it essentially means is that jobs won't necessarily be lost, they will just be evolved to a different platform. The same people that would be doing manual labor who won't be required to do that anymore will now be required to learn a different set of skills that can assist that going along, right? So it's a consistent evolution process because the technology will change, it will evolve, and we will have to evolve with it. So for example, a lot of work goes into computational intelligence, but what we're also coming towards is what is known as the hardware singularity, where computers are fundamentally cannot be upgraded in the system that they're currently in. So, for example, the component called transistors is what gave birth to computer circuits, but they're so small now that electrons that are the electricity that's passing through simply diffuse, which means you can't control them. And that means you can't make more transistors and you can't make more complex hardware systems. So what people are researching now is what is called quantum computing, right? Which is the computing 2.0, let's say, right? Which is the next generation of computing, because current computing will come to a halt at some point when you can't squeeze these transistors anymore. So what that means is everyone that's in technology at some point will have to move forward to this next thing. Otherwise, you yourself are not doing yourself justice because you won't be valid in this industry anymore. So you have to consistently learn and upgrade yourself as the industry is changing. It doesn't mean that jobs won't be available. They just will be changed to what the new standard requirement will be, just like education will be, right? Nowadays, bachelor's sometimes isn't enough. You have to do a master's in order to actually compete with other students and other people that are out there. That advancement cycle has to continue. You have to continuously grow. So I think there's this fear, but there's also this opportunity to really grasp it and upgrade yourself to a next level so that you're continuously on that curve going upwards, right? So new jobs will be formed. We just don't know what they are yet, and that's what scares us. But there will be new platforms coming up.
You're basically implying that one has to kind of train and retrain and kind of acquire the new skills as the technology is moving each time.
I mean, yeah, because you're in a field that doesn't come to a halt or stay the same. This isn't like the industrial age where we were fixed with coal mining, right? This is something that will consistently change. And with the birth of intelligence, there's even more firepower coming into this field to upgrade to the next level. We know that our compute power systems are not enough, which is why people are now focusing more on cloud or integrating into different circuit boards. I mean, if you look at GPU, which is predominantly used to accelerate deep learning technology, they have taken a huge boom into how you're designing your system. So, hardware engineering is a whole new thing right now. And now you're going into entertainment, special effects are taking huge deal. So, every time there's a consistent evolution in this field. So you're never stopping. And I guess that's a beauty of it, because then you're always in this consistent run to keep learning and growing. And that's why there's no fear that, at one point I won't have a job or I won't be valid. No, I think it's just you need to be prepared and accepting that you will be learning if you want to grow to that next level, right? If you want to continue rising that ladder, then absorb and imbibe all you can.
You made a good point that if you want to grow, is a very valid point. If you want to grow with everything that's growing around you, I think that's a very valid point. So an individual also has to want to do that next step as much as, instead of, otherwise you can get stagnated, as you said, or you just kind of stay in the same status quo.
Exactly, because technology is the one field where you have to be up to date with what's happening. Otherwise you also lose your own value in the industry. So tomorrow, if I say, oh yeah, I learned this algorithm that was used in 2016, but that's already antiquated. It's useless. The entire industry has moved into a new piece of tech. They won't hire me for that, right? So you have to consistently evolve and grow, which also
Yeah, that's
goes
true.
into
Yeah.
really like, then how do you choose what you want to do, right? So don't focus necessarily on industry trends. Use it as a foundation, but even in industry trends, if something is growing, it doesn't mean that that entire industry is growing, that one specific thing within the industry is growing. So choose what it actually interests you, because all areas of computing will grow. And they will evolve into something new. So, for example, Rajiv sir mentioned, apologies, Rajiv sir mentioned cybersecurity, right? And cybersecurity is now also entering a new age. Before, you would have these people that are consistently monitoring everything in order to ensure there's no attacks happening in a company, right? But now, the entire field has changed to developing more automated processes or machine learning algorithms that can also deal with more sophisticated types of attacks. So even there's this consistent evolution. You're no longer just a programmer coding in a dark room somewhere, but you could literally be in a coffee shop whilst maintaining this entire ecosystem that your company resides on. So I think it's a field that you never have to essentially, you can't stop learning, otherwise you won't do yourself justice to grow.
Yeah. I can tell you out of experience. So what I had learned 20 years back, I earlier said some computer courses I had done. Do I use them today, those languages? No, I've forgotten what they were. And I have to constantly upskill myself, because when IT systems came into picture, let's say almost 25, 30 years back, they were not highly regulated in a way. I'm just comparing it with medical profession. If you look at a doctor here in UK today, every year they need to, I think, go through some assessment every year to keep their degree relevant or valid. Their knowledge is up to date. But same thing was not applicable to IT. Anyone would come and say, yeah, I know how to code or something. Okay, here you go. You have a job. How good you were at coding, how you were good at configuring or managing the systems, there were no benchmarks. So these days, with now so much of supply of manpower in the IT space, suddenly people have realized, okay, hold on, there needs to be some benchmarks. So for prospective students or youngsters who want to go into IT, agree with Sam. You will have to keep yourself updated. You can't stop at the uni level saying, okay, you have done this, you have achieved these points or grades, and that's it. No, with the industry, you will have to keep on growing. Otherwise, you soon find yourself irrelevant. Because do remember, there's a lot of competition when we talk about IT space. Countries in Asia, let's say India, they are churning huge number of IT consultants who are really, you name a process, you name a software, you name a language, they have people there. So what is it that you here in UK can provide to a company that an offshore provider in India cannot provide? So keep that in mind. You will have to be always on top of your skill set level. And often I have seen now in industry, it's not much about coding. Let's be very honest. There are lots of packages, as Sam is saying, even for cybersecurity, you have artificial intelligence enabled products, which are doing the things for you. But you still need, at the end of the day, someone who's managing them, someone who understands what those products are doing. So someone who can look at them, whether from a coffee shop or from the comfort of your home, you still need someone who understands these things. That's where I would say youngsters to focus on. Okay, get an overall knowledge of it. You're on top of your knowledge curve. And then that's where you see your importance within these industry or these companies. They need people like you who understand everything and then manage it. You don't have to code necessarily all those things. And that's what I'm seeing the trend currently in the industry. There's not much around coding or developing. It's just managing things, understanding what these new products, new technologies are. And once you understand it, you just manage it. Okay.
I think just to add to that a little bit, while I'm not particularly in this sector, and of course I don't know as much about AI and all of this, but it is definitely one of those career paths which you should probably go on if you're considering technology, because it is the one which is definitely going to accelerate growth in not just its own sector, but pretty much everywhere else. I mean, AI is there for one main reason, because firstly, as Rajiv sir said, it makes the processes smoother and easier, but also because of the economics of it. It's cheaper to get an AI bot to do a repetitive task for you rather than have a person sitting there manually doing it, which you would have to pay for. And of course, economics eventually would win. So AI is something which would be implemented in a lot of these jobs. And yeah, as Sam also mentioned, while those jobs don't get lost, they just kind of get transferred to AI managing it, and you would be kind of overlooking it. So it's quite good to have a holistic overview of what's going on behind the scenes. So yeah, that's my take on it.
I think it's all really interesting to hear from a different perspective, because as in I'm in school right now and I'm taking computing, but it's thinking about it from a university student's perspective or somebody who's in the industry is completely different. Like, I did not know about kind of quantum computing and anything like that. But moving from more of the technical side of things to almost more of a social thing, it's well known that kind of getting women into STEM is kind of an issue that we're trying to combat. Even with Imperial, I think the men to women ratio is something like 65 to 35 in some courses and different, like higher in others. What do you guys think is an effective way to get more women into the industry? And at what level, and how you would propose kind of going about that?
So this may be a bit controversial, but I feel like it's different communities that have that problem. So for example, the Western world has that problem, but it's not necessarily the case that we all have that problem from the Asian community. Like if you look at the numbers in India or even within Kashmiris, you are going to be educated, otherwise you won't be a Kashmiri, period. Let's face it. You are going to have to be educated. You are going to have to move on to a very high profession field. But what you see is that everything that happens in the Western media, or US media in particular, influences the rest of the West as well. So I don't think it's a problem that occurs in every single community, but it is something that is now perceived or getting more shine from the Western community. Now, with regards to how you actually contribute into that field, I think it's also the mentality that goes way back in terms of how people were raised, or what actually is the thinking is that men do more kind of the tough jobs, whereas women don't do that, which was the mentality going way back. But you can see that changes in the sense that you can have that level of equality, in which case the only thing that you can do is not treat it as a problem as it is, and just keep it in the form of that it's a level playing field for both men and women. You just need to explore. And I guess what you're influenced in, what enables you to explore those areas, comes way down to what opportunities you were also given where you currently are, right? The opportunities that you see kids having here may not be the same as the opportunities that you will have elsewhere. And I think there goes into, it's not as simple as saying, let's make more scholarships or let's make more grants available. The problem is far deeper in the society and just the general day-to-day living as well on that front.
I think to add to that, something about aeronautics itself. It's a little bit unfortunate that if we look at our cohort or the years above or below, aeronautical engineering historically has had a very high percentage of male students. And while this is, it's shockingly low actually. There used to be roughly about 10 to 15% of females in this course a few years ago. While that is now improving, it's roughly, I think, about 20, 25% in our year, and it's improving in further years as we see it. I think one of the main reasons for aeronautics itself is the fact that it's something which was born out of the military in a way. A lot of aeronautical developments were fueled by the need to have defense and the need to have better weapons and stuff for your own country. And historically, that was kind of a bit of more of a male thing to do. And while that used to be the case, it is not anymore. There's a lot more to aeronautics than just rockets and airplanes. You can apply this, you can apply what we learn here in a lot of different fields. And I think that's one of the things which needs to change so that people can actually realize that it's not something which is, it's not driven by what the history used to be, it's what it is now. And I think the ways of getting women into STEM more is probably just to get them more interested and, you know, create awareness about what happens in each of the courses so that it attracts their interest and they can move forward with it.
Yeah, I think coming from the industry side, I have seen industries where there's a lot of participation from women in the workforce, not necessarily fully IT based workforce, but yes, I have seen a significant participation. But what I personally feel, you know, just if I go back a couple of points that I had raised earlier, you always have to be on top of your game if you want to be relevant in IT, okay? Which in layman's terms means you have to constantly upgrade, upskill. That means spending more time learning new things which you didn't know or didn't exist in the past. That means you have to constantly keep on learning. You will get decently paid, you will get recognized, but it means you have to put in more efforts. Now, personally speaking, as a manager, you know, I'm not being biased here. I have a budget. I have to run a project for a company, which requires, let's say, 3 IT people of a particular skill set. And I have, you know, offshore companies. You know, I'm just giving you a real life scenario. Offshore companies based, let's say, in India, who are able to provide me these 3 people at some cost. And the same 3 people, if I try to hire here in UK, one, I'll have to shell out more cost for them, okay? And secondly, the people in UK, I'm not being very specific about UK, I'm just giving you an example, what I have seen happen sometimes in the industry. People start to think, well, if I have to constantly upskill, I'm not able to compete with the people who come from far Asian backgrounds, okay, those countries where they have opportunities and are ready to work at a lower salary. Okay, that's a practical thing you got to understand. So what it means, there's then a negative vibe here within, you know, locally. Hey, this profession is quite demanding. You really have to be on top of your game to be relevant. And I've seen often some youngsters who then don't really want to continue this way. They are always looking at options, how to circumvent it and move into different areas. I have been part of schemes where we had college graduates being part of the projects. Yes, they all come with great enthusiasm, but the sooner they realize, okay, it's a bit of hard work, working odd hours, then I see the interest going down. And same, then I'm just trying to relate it with the female and male ratio that we see in the IT side of things. So I sometimes find then this negative publicity that sometimes you receive it kind of deters some people. It could be ladies as well. I mean, young girls who don't want to be part of then this IT profession, knowing they have to constantly keep on upgrading themselves. So to answer your point, Kashmir, you really have to be driven, isn't
Yeah, I
it?
think these are all yeah, I think these are all really valid and brilliant points. Yeah, I coming from an all-girls school, I've actually found that when girls are sort of amongst other girls, I think it's almost then that they sort of feel that they can approach these more technical subjects with more confidence. And I think that might is when I'm going to Durham this year on a scholarship. This part of what the scholarship entails is getting more women into the subject, and part of the way that we do that is to just create societies of just women who can communicate their ideas, because that does inspire confidence in these women to do better in their subjects. But thank you all for we've run out of time. We're running quite over time, but thank you all so much for your involvement. It was really interesting to hear everything from a university point of view and from a job point of view, what you guys had to say. So thank you so much. It was absolutely brilliant being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Tara. Thanks, Kashmir and Anu, for organizing this. Thank you.
I'd just like to add on that and say that you will most likely definitely hear from me when I'm picking my courses for even more information and just a generic idea. I did learn a lot in the last hour that I did not know before. So thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to say thank you, especially obviously to Kashmir and Tara for taking this initiative, and special thank you to Rajiv, Sam and Palash for giving us the insight into what happens in your world. I mean, I never imagined as an end user how much complexity is involved in, especially when Rajiv tells me that he's busy working, which he's working today as well. He's taking his time, especially for us today. How much of detail is involved in all the integrating all the systems. And also, Sam, it was interesting to hear how you came upon doing the AI, especially what happened with your granddad. I wish you all the best, and I hope you can progress that further into with your startup as well. And it'll be good to stay in touch to know how your startup is going on and how it's benefiting generally the industry. And Palash, all the best to you. We hope to hear soon from you, probably from space. Maybe would in a space in a suit and everything. It'll be really good to have one of us up there waving down below, and you can tell us what it's like. But thank you all for taking your time out today. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll stay in touch if there's anything. And obviously, it'll be good to hear from how everybody else is doing.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Thank you all again.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.